Senator Duniam.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I have to commend Senator Green for getting through 10 minutes on a motion, an MPI put forward by the Greens around banning coal and gas without mentioning either of those particular fossil fuels. I was enlightened by your contribution there about the Labor Party, now government's policies to legislate, but I'm still at a loss to understand, based on that contribution, where you stand on this MPI, but I'm sure other government speakers will enlighten us on exactly where they stand. But I'll put on record my views and the views of the opposition here, which have been made clear time and time again. Sometimes, though, I do think some in this place live in a parallel universe. And I think we could be forgiven for thinking that, because today we saw inflation numbers released, 6.1%. And that's a figure that I don't think we should just brush off and forget about and not pay attention to the impact that's going to have on Australian households and businesses, job-creating entities. These sorts of things are an important context to set as a backdrop for the debate that the Greens have so generously put down for us. The motion, which I'll read again, as put forward by Senator Waters: the biggest causes of climate change is the extraction and burning of coal and gas, and to prevent the climate crisis from getting worse, no new coal and gas projects can be developed in Australia. Now, that is a standalone statement they've spoken to today, but the impacts of doing that, I think, on the economy, and I mentioned earlier on today that there are two fragile things that we need to take into account here: one, the environment, and two, the economy. Environmental decisions have an impact on the economy, on people's jobs, on their ability to pay power bills, keep food on the table, keep their businesses running. And to make a decision over here with absolutely no regard for what impact it has over here is a ridiculous approach to public policy, and that is exactly what we're seeing here. I can see why Senator Green refused to even go near it, because it is difficult for the Labor Party to reconcile their rhetoric around fossil fuels and the problems they're going to have when it comes to the Australian Greens and trying to legislate in this place and deal with their demands when it comes to things like this. I've already mentioned inflation hitting 6.1%, a many decades record being hit, which is, as I say, going to have an impact. We know that power prices, similarly, are going sky high. And from June 2021, that prices have gone up in the national electricity market by 200% to 300%. That's a huge amount. We know that Labor won't be able to fulfil their promise to the Australian people from just 9 weeks ago that power bills will go down by $275. Bank interest rates are going up. Cost of fuel to put in your car is going up. And Australian households are hurting. They're doing it tough. And so when on the first substantive day of sitting in this parliament, in the Australian Senate, we're here debating this issue with absolutely no regard for the impact that it has on households and businesses, I think it's something Australians need to wake up and listen to and see what these sorts of policies, this sort of direction has on the impacts of households that are doing it tough, Australians that work hard. It is something, frankly, that I think the Greens should probably reflect upon, given this demonstrates how out of touch they are with Australians who just want to get on and live their lives and want the government to bring in policies that help them live their lives, make a better future for themselves and their children, have a go, get rewarded, you know, those great Australian ideals. But, as I say, this MPI has been written with zero regard for the impact such a call would have on the ability for honest, hard-working Australians to make a go of things. Look, we already know the facts around how much these resources specified in this MPI contribute to energy generation in this country. The great bulk of energy generated in this country is from these resources. Now, we know there are plans to, and of course the government have outlined their plan to transition to renewables, but the idea that you can just shut down exploration and expansion of existing resources, which are going to be needed, any expert will tell you that, without forcing businesses and households, hospitals, schools to turn the lights off, the heaters off, you know, it is a short-sighted, cynical stunt which will have bad impacts on Australians. And we don't know when the existing resource, let's say this thing MPI and what the Greens would love to do to Australia, let's say in some dystopian world this became reality, when would the lights switch off? In 5 years, 10 years? When would we be able to, or not be able to keep the lights on in schools, or store in appropriate refrigeration units vital medicines in hospitals? When would we stop being able to do that? When would you be sitting in the dark at home eating your dinner? When would the factories stop being able to do what they do best, manufacture, something we want to do more of here with our resources rather than outsourcing it to countries that do burn fossil fuels, something you guys seem to forget about. The jobs are lost, the businesses are shut down, and the cycle goes on and on. And this is something that these trite statements, these motions that we see from time to time, never ever take account of and never have any regard for. Those people that work in those industries, those people impacted, they don't matter apparently. And we only have to come down to Tasmania, where, of course, we do have businesses that do rely on coal to be able to do what they do. The Railton cement factory, for one, I don't know, we've got this shortage of material to go into the housing and construction sector, but let's say the Fingal colliery runs out of coal and needs to expand. I presume if the Greens had their way, we'd no longer be able to source coal. We wouldn't be able to produce concrete to be able to feed that plant and, of course, the housing and construction sector. But that doesn't matter. How about the North Skoog paper mill in the Derwent Valley? Doesn't matter. They use coal to fire their boilers. They're looking for alternatives, of course. I'm sure they're ones that we'd want to stand in the way of. But as it stands, under your motion, we'd be standing in the way of that, and the 500-600 jobs in the Derwent Valley, who cares? Don't worry. That community does not matter. And this is the thing. No regard for these people and no consideration at all for the flow-on effects that this would have for the economy and, indeed, also for the environment. And I'm waiting to see what the alternatives are, because I look at a bit of recent history around what we could be doing, because if we're shutting down fossil fuel use and no more new gas or coal operations and projects across this country, then where are we sourcing this energy that we need to be a competitive economy from? This fragile economy I talked about before, the one that's facing the economic headwinds that the government have already been talking about, that the international community is bracing for. Where do we get this alternative energy from? Because we know, and I heard Senator Whish-Wilson refer to Renew Economy a little earlier on, and I was having a look at that website, and there was a link on there talking about how the Greens opposed Marinus, the Marinus link, a vital piece of infrastructure which is there to generate investment in renewable energy, in the battery of the nation, expanding our hydro generation. Oh, but no, we can't have that. So, OK, we can't have hydro, and we all know the Greens were given birth to out of the Franklin Dam dispute, so they're definitely against hydro. They also opposed the Robbins Island wind farm, one example of renewables they're opposed to. So we've got hydro, we've got wind, no go. So where are we getting this energy from? They want to be a part of the solution here, but they don't provide solutions. They just tell us what we shouldn't be doing. They have no regard for honest, hard-working men and women that will be impacted by this. But I'm not surprised by this, and I doubt a great many Australians would be either, to be honest with you. And, we in Tasmania know exactly what we're dealing with here when it comes to this sort of thing and the party behind the movement of such MPIs and motions. When you have the Greens near the levers of power, bad things happen. We warned Australians about this, and here we are, the first substantive day of sitting in the Senate, and this is the first thing they chuck down. So can I tell you, this is what we need to expect, and it is a word of warning to the Australian Labor Party, the government. We all know you have two pathways to legislate in this place, and one of them is in fact with the Australian Greens. And we've just been given a sneak preview of the kinds of things, I dare say probably the stuff that they've been laying on the table in your negotiations over your legislated 43% reduction in emissions bill. This is what the world is in for in Australia. At a time when people can't pay their mortgages, can't pay their power bills, can't put fuel in the car, this is what the Australian Greens are proposing. It is a dim, dark future, not just because we can't keep the lights on, but because the policies this crew put forward are bad for Australia, are bad for businesses, households, and will mean economic destruction and the removal of our ability to compete in the international economy.